Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Junatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Junatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam tato jayamudiraye. Om Jnana Devanandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Viditam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We're continuing our discussion of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and in the last several days we've dwelled on the first canto, second chapter, 11th verse, Vedanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. We've discussed some of the semantics of the verse. We've read the purport at least 3 times. And today is of Varaha Ekadashi. Because it's Ekadashi and also we're observing Varaha, Dave's appearance day. And in conceiving of the meaning of the verse, in which we're hearing that the experts in Vedic science are describing the absolute truth in 3 features. And hearing Srila Prabhupada's purport about Paramatma, perhaps it was yesterday or the day before, because we didn't have a Bhagavatam class yesterday. We went instead to Dandamanga Nadi and jumped in. And understanding the methodology to become aware of Supreme Spirit as the one that's empowering our senses, becoming aware that we're the observer of the senses. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tatvavit pashyan shinban svasan jigran ashnan kachan swapan swasan pralapan vishranan grinan unmishan nimishan napi indriyan indriyateshu aratanta iti darayan. Krishna says somebody can attain the divine consciousness, he or she can see that the senses are acting and that person has nothing to do with them. They're going on by the arrangement of nature. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha. Krishna's material nature has a mechanical feel to it. That things go on. Of course, they're divinely empowered, but they're going on as if mechanically. And we also heard from Prabhupada's purport that by understanding the nature of Supreme Spirit, as is described in the metaphor from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, that there are 2 birds in one tree. And one bird is the eating bird, and that's the soul in the material world trying to enjoy the various tastes of the world, which are the combinations and permutations of the 3 modes of material nature. Just like yesterday at the bus station, we met 2 little groups of cooks who were sitting and making a stash of onions and garlic in a very concentrated little samadhi program. Very clean though, with a bucket of water and making sure that they didn't make any mistakes. Very expert. It's definitely a pungent aroma from that place and a palpable sense of the mode of ignorance. And I was thinking on the way home, no wonder we don't eat onions and garlic or offer them to Krishna, because they really stink. And it seems like a stinky habit to have. And there is a way in which the little bird, overwhelmed by the reflection of the spiritual world, seeing variety in the material world, it becomes enamored and also disoriented. Narupa masyeha tatopa labhyate nanto nachadir nachasampratishta ashvatamenam suvrudamuram asanga shastrena tritena chitva. So the Shastra says then we're in a convoluted banyan tree. Its roots are upwards, branches are down. We can't see its form because it's too big for our perception, and we're not sure which direction we're even facing. So orientation is needed, and detachment is needed to understand that we're not the body, and to be able to see that we're not the controllers, and the Supreme Spirit is there within the heart. And then, as indicated in the verse, Bhagavan iti shabdyate. And we already established from the Bhagavad Gita that, as Krishna mentions, he's the source of the impersonal Brahman. And yesterday Prabhupada gave the logic that God has more to do than just fulfill the desires of the living entities, because by definition he's the supreme controller and enjoyer. So one can logically understand there must be another aspect of God, and it's something that Uttara mentioned to Parikshit after the Bhagavatam was spoken, and she didn't have a great vantage point because there were apparently a lot of others up front. And so she asked the summary of the Bhagavatam, and she surmised that because there are certain kinds of devotees who have a unique love for the Supreme in a personal aspect, there must be a special place for that aspect of God. And that becomes one of the subject matters for Parikshit Maharaj's summarization of the Bhagavatam in the book called the Bhagavatamrita, where he describes the ultimate abode. And Krishna talks about it in summary in the Bhagavad Gita. For instance, he says, Parastasmat tu bhavanyo vyakto vyaktat sanatanaha vyaktak sarveshu bhuteshu nashyatsu navinashati. It must be beyond just the viraja, the demarcation between the material and spiritual worlds. And it also must be superior to the impersonal Brahman realization, because we know from Bhagavatam, in context, there's a way in which those who achieve Brahman realization, for lack of variety, eventually they fall back down again to the material variety, not having understood or been introduced to the supreme variety and the source of all variety, Rasuvaisaha, Bhagavan, Krishna. And of course we have in the Brahma Samhita, Goloka namni nijadamni tale tatasya devi mahesha haridama suteshu teshu te prabhava nichaya vihitaschayena govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. A hierarchy which explains that lowest of all is located Devidam. Above Devidam is Maheshnam, an interim point. Above Maheshnam is Haridam, which is Vaikuntha, but above Haridam is Krishna's own realm, Goloka, Nijadam, the personal abode of Krishna, and that's Bhagavan iti shabdyate. Those who know the complete whole, they understand these three categories, and Bhagavan, Krishna, is the ultimate realization, and in order to give people in the material world an opportunity or an alternative to the variety of the material world and an object of meditation, anugrahaya bhaktanam manusham deham ashita, Krishna comes in his form as Bhagavan to the material world and displays his pastimes, his lila. And of course we know, Jan makarma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvata tyakva deham punar janma naiti mameti sorjuna. When one becomes acquainted with the nature of Bhagavan's activities and the way he takes birth in the world, and understands that there's a difference between a person who broke the law and gets put in jail and the governor walking through the jail to inspect it. They're in different categories they have a different status. The person who's incarcerated is forced to stay there until they finish their term or till they're given clemency. Whereas did I say governor? The governor is not subjected to the same laws, although he may be in the same place. So anugrahaya bhaktanam manusham deham ashita. Out of mercy, anugrahaya, Bhagavan comes in his human form. Third line, sham deham ashita, bhajate tadrishi kridha, yashritva tat paro bhavet. Says the Bhagavatam that then we got something to talk about. Then you really have something to talk about. Otherwise, everything you talk about is simply more entangling. And that's exactly what Narada told Vyasadeva after he read all the stuff that he had produced. And he said, nah, not so nice, because you haven't given us enough to talk about Bhagavan. And it's the topics of Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, that Yashrutva Parobhavet, by that process of remembering Bhagavan through talking about him, through hearing about him, liberates the living entity from the material world. Vikriti tam vrajavadubridrahamcha Vishnu shradhanviton nashinu yada taparna yedya bhaktim param bhagavati pratilabhya kamam hridrogam ashva pahinot yacharina tira. At the end of the story of the rasa dance, there's the proclamation, the declarative statement of Shukadeva Goswami, who says that this is not ordinary. Bhagavan is interacting with his pure devotees, and he says, if you hear this with faith, Shradhanvito Nashinu Yadata Varniyedya, then Bhaktim Param Bhagavatim Pratilabhyakam, you'll attain the highest kind of bhakti. And this is what the Bhagavatam advocates as the means of liberation, is this a katha about the personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. You have avatar katha, the different avatars who come. For instance, today we're remembering Varahadev. Varahadev appears in different kalpas. And in the third canto we find how Brahma, who's entrusted with management, and I never knew this because I artfully avoided management for many years, but when somehow I got bamboozled into it, I had this reckoning that I wondered why there was constant problems, and my nerves became so jangled that I took the wind chimes off the outside of my kutir because they bothered me so much. And my wife became alarmed and thought, what happened to you? Didn't you? Probably still alarmed. And then Krishna gave me a realization that actually management means problems, because that's basically what you're paid to do, is solve them or defer them to others who can solve them, or deal with it somehow or other, or be there just to hold people's hands when they're going through it, but you got to face it. So Brahma is the head of the universe, and he had a huge problem because one of the most important planets in the universe fell out of orbit due to drill baby drill. There was this idea, Hiranyakashipu taking all the oil out of the ground and just exploit everything and everyone, and let's just tear the place down. That's what these kind of folks do. They just like to exploit everyone. There are upheavals in the material world. Everyone's sailing along thinking everything's just fine. But when life looks like easy street, there's danger at your door. And Hiranyakashipu showed up. Telephone call came, some dude down there with fire coming out of his head. Brahma had to go deal with it. And he had a lot of demands, and he became so powerful, he took over all the demigods' positions, closed down different departments, just imposed his will on everybody for a long time, until Hiranyakashipu came and tore him to shreds. And then we have Hiranyaka, Gold Eye. Sounds like a James Bond. Hiranyaka, that's what a Gold Eye. of course, meditating on the Lord, Varahadev appeared singing hymns to him, and as he shakes his body, later in Krishna's pastimes, when he was in Dwarka, he had how many wives? He said 16,108 wives. And two of his principal wives in Dwarka are Rukmini and Satyabhama. As it turns out, the earth is an expansion of Satyabhama. Plenary expansion. Partial expansion for Bhumi. And did you know that when Varahadev picked up the earth, Bhumi, they also conceived a son, who Bhaumasura, also known as Narakasura, same personality. And Bhaumasura became a problem child because he became a disturbance to the universe. Krishna had promised Bhumi that if he ever had to kill his own offspring, because if his offspring became troublesome to his devotees, then he said, then I'll slay my own son. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought that up to his mother as well, that pastime. And Krishna often combines the fulfillment of different purposes in every Leela. And so he had to appease Satyabhama because she's competitive. Whereas Rukmini isn't so much. In fact, we know the whole pastime of Krishna trying to incite her ire by telling her, yeah, I don't think you should have married me. There are much better candidates like Shishupal. I mean, what was wrong with him anyway? And he went on, deprecated himself, made a long list. And rather than becoming angry, Rukmini fainted because that's her nature. She's very soft-hearted. Whereas Satyabhama, when Krishna had given a parijata flower to Rukmini from the heavenly planets, Satyabhama had then wanted a lot more than just a flower to make up for that. So Krishna took her on a mission he was on to the heavenly planets, and he stole a whole tree for Satyabhama. It's like to make up for the one flower he gave to Rukmini. And meanwhile, he took her along on Garuda. They were traveling by Garuda Airlines. And incidentally, he came to the abode of Bhaumasura to slay him. And one of the reasons he had brought Satyabhama around is because Bhumi is an expansion of Satyabhama. So he could take permission from Satyabhama to kill the Bhaumasura because he had promised Bhumi that he would do that. So just as Bhaumasura came out to attack, he got the nod from Satyabhama. Okay, you can kill him. So he killed Narakasura on that expedition. The Bhagavatam goes into great detail the pastimes of Bhagavan, and they have what is called vilas, an attractive feature to them. It's the only attractive feature that will lift us from the mire of material existence, just as Varahadev had lifted the earth, so Krishna's pastimes can lift us up. Yat pada pankacha palasa vilasya bhakta karmashrayam gratitam ugratayanti santa tadvanda rikta matayo yatayo pirudha shoto ganasta maranam vajavasudevam. fourth canto Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam describes how most people, even yogis, who militantly control their senses, and they get pretty good at it, sooner or later are overcome by a sleeper wave that comes in. Along the California coast, if you go to tourist towns where people go for their romantic honeymoons, there's signs saying, be careful because honeymooners have been washed away on the peaks. They a little further, honey, just move a little to the left, and all of a sudden, a big wave unexpectedly comes in. Sometimes the ocean seems okay, and then a huge wave that's 10 times bigger than the other ones just sneaks up, and then it pulls everybody in, including the wedding party. There's nobody there. It's not funny. Seriously not funny. So he says, because Rikta Matayo, people don't have the vilas. The Rikta Matayo means, according to Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, commenting on the verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu where it's quoted by Rupa Goswami, he says, Rikta Matayo means they're empty-headed. Rikta Matayo. They don't have any pastimes of Bhagavan in their head. And therefore there's no vilas. So yet pada pankacha palasa means that vilasa bhaktya, the devotees, from hearing about the pastimes of Krishna and the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, they develop this affection for it, appreciation. It gets in them and they want to hear more and more. And it's that attractive feature of Krishna's pastimes, the vilas of Bhagavan. Just Paramatma won't do it. And in Brahman, it's boring. If you probably compared it sitting in an airplane for a long time, how do you like that? If they didn't put a screen in front of everybody, they'd be killing each other. I mean, nowadays they are anyway, but put a bunch of uncouth people in a tube for 3 hours and let them fight it out. And in the meantime, give them alcohol. See how they last. But if you get in a tube like that after 10 hours, 11 hours, So we have to have the vilas. Yat pada pankacha vilasa vilasya bhakta. Karmashrayam gratitam utgratayanti santa. Just by hearing about Bhagavan, then the knot in the heart is cut. The knot that holds us to the material world is cut. And that goes to the verse I quoted earlier from the Bhagavad Gita, Narupa masyeha tatopa labhyate nanto nachadir nachasampratishta ashvatameram suvarudam asanga shastrena dridhena chitva. So Krishna says you definitely have to cut down the tree of the material world. Then you can start your path back to Godhead. Parimargitavyam means like, okay, free to go back to Godhead. And that's what frees us, is Bhagavan Kata, Krishna Kata. And that's the Bhavaushadi, Shotra Manobhirama, Nirvita Tarsha Upagiyamana, Bhavaushada Shotra Manobhirama, Kat Uttama Shloka Gunanavada, Punman, Virajeta, Vina Pashugnat. If you don't have that medicine and you can't get association that brings you up to the level where you desire to hear it, then you got to hang out with all the meat eaters who they eat little critters with tentacles and stuff. They eat that stuff. And then they'll eat bigger animals too. That's what they do. And in the process, they kill their soul. And so Shukadeva Goswami is just saying, if you can't get this Bhagavan Kata and the association of pure devotees who are speaking it, then you got to hang out with the people who eat stuff with feathers. And good luck with that. It takes you down and down and down into the darkest regions of ignorance in the material world. So we're so lucky, the sages have pointed out these three categories Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. And the Bhagavatam is pointing towards Bhagavatam, towards Bhagavan. Itam satam Brahma sukhanubhutya dasyam katanam paridaivatena mayashitanam naradarakena shakambraja rukarta punya punjaha. The highest level of practitioners of yoga are those who succumb vrijaru krita punya punjaha. They've achieved the highest level of bhakti qualification in their hearts, bhakti and mukhi sukriti, and that Shukadev points out these different levels. He said there's those who are attracted to Brahman, as that's all they've gotten qualified for, is those who are interested in Brahman. Itam sakam Brahma sukhanu bhutya. They're aspiring for the happiness of Brahman. And then there's dasyam katanam paradaivatena, those who are interested in Vaikuntha kata. And then there's mayashitanam, people in Maya, naradarakena, who just think that Krishna is an ordinary person and that everything exploded from a chunk that came out of nothing. And then there's Sakamvrajaru Krita Punya Punjaha. Those people are the most fortunate. They're playing with Krishna in the spiritual world. And that's our process. And Rupa Goswami says anybody can get there, starting with hearing. Here's the essence of all vice. He says, how's the verse start? Huh? Tanama rupa charitadu sikirtananu smrityo karmena rasana manasi niyoja tishtan vraje tanaduragi janadagami kalam nayed akilamitu padesha saro. He said, here's your essence of all the advice. First of all, he's putting all his advice into one little book, and then into everything in the book he's putting into one verse. And he said, you want to know the essence of it? He said, start with hearing about Krishna and practicing the basic tenets of Krishna consciousness. I saw Pradyumna Prabhu in front of the Bhakti Center, and we just sort of have a sporadic dialogue on an email, and there was he's been needling me to study Sanskrit more, and I have a stop-start. I use Sanskrit to procrastinate doing more important things. So I haven't learned very much. But he's always on my case. So when he saw me there and he asked me, he already knew that I hadn't been attending my classes. And he just said, crack a book. And he turned around and walked away. So I wrote that down, crack a book. And then Shraddha said the other day to shed a few pounds. And then there's chant great rounds. There's a few basic things you can do to stay in contact with Bhagavan, and crack a book. Hear the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the association devotees. That's the essence of all advice. Go on hearing and doing the basic practices of Krishna consciousness. Tanama rupa charitadi sukirtananu smrityo kramena. Then gradually, step by step, Manasi niyoja, then your mind, everything, tishtam vraje, tanaduragi jananagami, then you'll actually transfer yourself from the material world to the spiritual world, in that you'll become attracted to the mode of worship of the residents of Vraja through hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Then you're engaged in devotional service properly, and you'll have a relationship with the spiritual world that'll just continue after you leave this body. Reflections or questions? Sundarananda Prabhu.
Thank you, Maharaj, for emphasizing on the. Thank you for emphasizing on the point of focusing on the fundamentals or the basics. One reflection that I had in this yatra is that, of course, we go to many places there have been pastimes of the devotees of the Lord, and but one thing I really liked is how you bring back everything to the fundamental practices. So there is focus on chanting and hearing Bhagavatam and doing Sankirtan. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. Wherever we are, if we keep to the basics, it will feel ourselves above the modes of material nature, 1, 2.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I really like that in the morning you mentioned that we should do our 16 rounds without offenses. And I was really happy to know this, because we get to hear so many other things that Ekadashi means you have to do 25 rounds and this and that. But you made it very simple, that just do your 16 rounds the way you're doing it, but do it with a lot of attention.
Yeah, thanks. It is helpful to come down to what the basics are, and then, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, follow the simple path strictly. I just received a quote the other day from a friend in which Prabhupada said, it's illegal to collect a lot of obscure quotes from a lot of different shastras just to show that you know more than other people about a topic. He said, you only need a few books, but get to know them really well. Go deeply within several of these books, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, for the purpose of being very clear about what's important. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, follow the simple path, but do it very strictly. Just because it's simple doesn't mean that you don't have to put your attention to it. You should be very strict about it. And then we also find that it's a lot deeper than we thought. So, just 16 rounds, that's all you're going to do? Well, if you actually chant 16 rounds attentively, you realize that, I'm barely doing anything. There's an ocean here, and I haven't even investigated more than just below the surface. What else is there? And what to speak of, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada said on a morning walk, when there was an argument about reading many different kinds of books available from different mats, Prabhupada said, yeah, fine, but assimilate what you have. And if you try to assimilate Bhagavad Gita as it is, it may be a lot deeper than you thought. Who can actually assimilate Bhagavad Gita fully before moving on to every book available at Rasa Bihari Lal's in the biggest little bookstore in the world? I hope there's never an earthquake, because that place will really collapse.
Prabhu, I want to share that reading Bhagavatam, as you were mentioning the basics, we were reading in a group on a regular basis. It's been a couple of years. Once we finished the entire Bhagavatam, we went back again. But each time you go through a canto, we see that we read the same section before, but maybe one layer was open for you to see what was beneath that. So the more we try to sincerely serve Bhagavatam by reading on a regular basis, I feel that slowly, like the verses are there, the Bhagavatam is there, the purport is there, but it's just that our vision was covered. So slowly those layers are removed. Only if we try to sincerely serve Bhagavatam.
Yeah, there's a term we just looked at recently, and I can't remember the Sanskrit term for it, but it's that one should read these things over and over and over and over again. Not you just read it once and said, I've done that. The more times you read it, the more meaning comes out and the deeper it becomes. It's one of the amazing aspects of Bhagavad Gita that our acharyas have noted, that although it's written in simple Sanskrit language, it's always intriguing, and there's always more. You never get tired of hearing it. Somebody else? Yes, Mukaravinda, and then Kaunteya Prabhu.
Maharaj, in the morning you were quoting this verse that Bhire Munyo Thagre Bhagavanta Madokshajam, like how this chanting, following this chanting 16 round, is it when we follow by the following the footsteps of great Acharya. Similarly, I was remembering that in Dhaka, when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he gave one verse for a month. I think first canto, first chapter, first verse for a month. He just gave a whole talk on that one verse, and I was remembering that this yatra, how we started with this one verse and we stick to this verse, and how this verse has opened so many meanings, like and so many great verses that you supplied to understand each Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagwan. And today was like a very grand finale that we reached to the appearance day of Lord Vara, and we dwell more into the Bhagwan Tattva. And one thing I was taking, like, don't be Riktamatiyo. Don't be like Riktamatiyo. It's like nothing you are getting out of this life if you are Riktamatiyo. Like, there is no pastime in your head. So that was I'm taking from this class.
Thank you. I could pass the microphone back to Kaunteya Prabhu. Prabhupada had a godbrother named Dr. Kapoor. I forget his initiated name, OBL Kapoor. He told the story about how he had come to Krishna consciousness. So told some of the ISKCON devotees, because he had been a Pakamayavadi, but he was highly learned scholar. But I'll tell the story in a bit. Kaunteya Prabhu.
A question. I know a devotee who enjoys many aspects of devotional service, including reading books. But this devotee, he told me, honestly, he does not like to read Srila Prabhupada's purports. This person likes the Bhagavatam and Krishna, but doesn't like to read Srila Prabhupada's purports. So what would you advise this person?
Well, it really depends on the reason that he doesn't like it. I met a guy in Santa Cruz. I was on the street. I was showing him the Bhagavad Gita once. It's probably 10, 15 years ago. And he gave off the vibe. It seemed to me that he had some context for literature like this. And he looked at it, he started thumbing through it, and he goes, yeah, Bhagavad Gita, but I don't want these commentaries, as if they were an annoyance to him. And he says, here, take it back. I don't want it with the commentaries. And his reason had to do with he didn't trust anybody. And then, of course, it really depends on what it is that a particular person or that particular person, why he doesn't find it helpful or attractive or whatever the description of his aversion is. It would be helpful to know that.
Mostly, from what I understand, is that this person finds it a bit boring in the sense of being highly repetitive.
Well, you could say that chanting japa is highly repetitive too. Because you just say the same mantra over and over again. I've heard people say that before. It's like, how can you keep doing that? And the reason one can keep doing it is because it's not an ordinary sound vibration. And from one point of view, the way it seems repetitive in some ways is Prabhupada's being meticulous to make sure if somebody opens the book anywhere, they'll not only have context, but they'll also get the most essential points. I mean, obviously there's Leela where either there's no purports there, or there are fragmental purports just giving a little context to that, but in the bulk of his purports, he oftentimes tries to say what the essential points are, and he'll repeat them. So if somebody opens it up and looks, they can't really take it out of context because the ultimate thing is there. I guess your question is what to do about that person, or what specifically are you, which should we discuss?
Yeah, how can we help someone who feels like that?
Well, first of all, in diagnosing somebody and trying to help them, it's good to get as much information as possible. I mean, going to doctors for the first time can seem annoying because they say, well, the first meeting we're going to talk for 2 hours, that's it. And by the way, it'll cost you a lot more too, the first. I don't know what that's about. It's probably so you'll come back for the second and third one and it's cheaper. But I know doctors, you go to any doctor, whether it's an acupuncturist or an allopathic doctor, and they'll ask, if they've never met you before, they don't have a record of all that you've been through and what your condition is, they ask you a lot of questions. And in counseling people for instance, getting married, there's like 600 questions to ask them, what's your psychophysiological nature and does it match up with this other person? And so I am reluctant to just give some glib answer that, oh, this person is like this or that. In order to see, I'd have to meet that person. My experience has been that when people give audience to hearing Prabhupada's books, and they hear long sections of them. For instance, during Kartik, we read the whole, what did we read? Third canto. We read the whole third canto in about 25 days. And when you hear the whole third canto, it seems that it's a self-contained unit, and you get a particular history that follows all the way through. And there are ways in which Prabhupada's presentation, although it has some repetition, which gets to be, after a while, familiar to the ear, and rather than feeling bored, the devotees feel like familiar with it, and they feel like this part is emphasized for a reason. And then there are gems thrown in that you hear the flavor of Prabhupada's devotional service and his perspective. For instance, I mentioned the other day, he'll say something like, the whole material world's a colossal hoax. And he'll use words like will-o'-the-wisp. And as an example of reading carefully and deeply, for years we've been reading will-o'-the-wisp. And we just think, I don't even know what that means exactly. But then we looked it up one night while we were all reading, and it has a stupendous context for the subject matter, as in will-o'-the-wisp is this phosphorus flame that comes out spontaneously from organic matter that can lead travelers off the trail and into a marsh. And then there are other contexts to it also. My point is that it's full of jewels. If you look at the ocean on the surface, you just think, it's just water. It's pretty boring. But if you go down into the water and you really look around, then you see that there's amazing life down there. Oceanographers, I heard, have estimated that they've only cataloged 8% of the life within the ocean. And people who never poked their nose down there just think it's just water. But actually there's inverse mountains that are bigger than Kilimanjaro, and they're creatures and all kinds of things. So I don't know, maybe by association. And also, if somebody were to just suspend their boredom for a little while, that always helps. Because my mind often tells me, reading Bhagavad Gita is going to be boring. Why don't you do something else? But as soon as I sit down and start reading it, I think, oh my God, this is fantastic. And I mean, just hearing Vishnu Prabhu's point yesterday from Asochanam Vasochastwam, Pragnavanam Chabasase, Gatasunagas Akatasumscha. I was thinking about it all morning. That I've been looking at that verse for years, and then he brought up a point that was a perspective changer for me. So, yeah, everything's boring in this world when you take it for granted, or before you get association of somebody who's not bored by it. So again, it's an individual case. It's hard to say. I'll just finish with this story. The OBL Pakor, he told about how he became a member of the Gaudiya Math and a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. May I? He told how he was a scholar, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was looking for young scholars, bright young people who are educated, who are also pious, and he would bring them in and inculcate them into the Lord Chaitanya's movement, and they became very effective at research, writing articles, preaching to high-minded people or highly posted people. And when they came and told, some of the young preachers came and told Srila Bhaktisiddhanta about this young person they had met who was highly educated, came from a really good family. They were excited about him, but they said, but one thing, he's a Paka Mayavadi. He's very dedicated to Mayavad. And did he want to see him? Did he want to meet him? So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta agreed to it, and so he had them bring OBL Kapoor, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta then began speaking Krishna Katha from the Bhagavatam. And then he just got up and walked out. And Kapoor came to subsequent lectures, and he would sit and listen, and he would raise his hand, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta never called on him. And he came for a long time, and he said one day he realized that his mind was changing, and he had been in a debate, and it was with a highly placed person. Actually, it was a king, and the king was professing Mayavad philosophy, and Kapoor then realized that he had the arguments to defeat the king, although he didn't bring it up because he saw the guards standing over there too with their choppers, and he figured, better let this one go. And then he realized, as he said, that he had a complete conversion of heart from this Mayavad conception to wanting to serve Krishna. And it was from hearing from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and in many of the lectures, he was speaking Krishna Katha from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And that's how he described how he was converted. And I had a similar experience, that when I came to join the temple, which I was very eager to do, and I mean, the first time I visited the temple in San Francisco, I walked in and I couldn't see the deities. I could only see the flowers, because I had been trained to see God in nature and to chant my mantra and just see God everywhere. And I thought, who are these forms? And who's Krishna? I appreciated the Bhagavad Gita very much, but then when I saw Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam there and I saw all these stories and people walking around doing things, I thought, I don't know what this is. But sitting in the Bhagavatam class every day, I had a change of heart. And I remember the exact moment it happened when we were on the topic of Krishna and Dwarka. And it was talking about how Krishna's queens couldn't quit those lotus feet. They become attached to those lotus feet. I just remember that class. It was after a few months we had gone through all those topics, and I even remember who was giving class. And just this experience, all of a sudden I could see the deities. And all of a sudden I felt attached to Krishna. And I saw it for myself in front of my own eyes. And then it became more and more interesting to me. So there's a way in which Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which is pointed towards Bhagavan, is the panacea. And it is our great fortune to be in the Sampradaya where this is pointed out, because most places it doesn't come up. Or when it comes to the topic of Bhagavan, it's put in the context that, well, that's not the real thing. The real thing's behind Bhagavan or in Bhagavan, inexplicably beyond our conception, and then it ruins the whole thing. It's become spoiled. We've got the straight Krishna Katha. And by hearing Avatar Katha and hearing the Krishna Katha, that's the method by which one can chop down the tree of the material world and then enthusiastically, parimargitavyam, make the journey back home, back to Godhead. And coming to the Dham also and experiencing the places where Krishna performed his pastimes. It's also edifying, isn't it? Dear Srila Prabhupada, today we're... Shraddha, you want to say something before we close? Yeah, please come up.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, how are you feeling on the sixth day of the yatra? Fantastic. So I'll be quick here. So the plan for today is that we have prasadam ready for you. It is Ekadashi prasadam for those of you who like to honor prasadam. Then Maharaj, I'm thinking that it's about 8:54, so maybe we'll have a little shorter breakfast and then proceed for Haridas Thakur Samadhi at 9:50. Does it work for you? 950. Yes, 950, right? Little less than an hour that we normally give. So we'll go there in totos. Totos will be available for you, so just proceed the usual route. And then we'll go to Haridas Thakur Samadhi. And we're going to play it by the ear, how it all pans out. So we will do darshan of the Samadhi, do parikrama there. And then the plan is to have Krishna Katha at ISKCON, which is just right next to it. So I'm thinking that, by 11 o'clock we should be, proceeding towards ISKCON, where we'll have a Krishna Katha for as long as Guru Maharaj wants to have the Katha there. And then after that we will come to the beach and we'll do Harinam and book distribution in the beach. And then after that we'll come back here for lunch at 2 p.m. So there are the 4 question books that you're planning to distribute them at the beach as well. You carry some from here. I just thought, yeah, we should do that, right? So one more thing I wanted to let you know is that when we take the totos from here, they won't take you all the way to Haridas Thakur Samadhi. Right? They will drop you at a point, but it's a very short walk from there. You can just walk there. And then from Haridas Thakur Samadhi to ISKCON, it's very, very short. So you'll be able to do that. Some of you had asked me for weighing machines. I have got them at the back of the class. I'll be happy to give you. For those coming with us to phase 2 of the yatra, we do have the tickets, the paper tickets available with us. After lunch, we will distribute the tickets to you in the registration area. And more about tomorrow's thing tomorrow. But right now, that's all, Maharaj.
Thank you. We reversed the order. Karuna Shakti has a question.
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to let you know that there's Mahaprasad that will always be sitting on the right side of the water dispenser, like the incense, the Mahaprasad, and the water. Please take.
Thank you so much.
Past years, we've done Harinam book distribution on the way to Haridas Thakur's, but as Shraddha pointed out to me earlier, that the crowd gets bigger later. So instead of walking down there and distributing books all the way there and then coming straight back by Toto, we're going to go straight there, then spend a little time there. Then when it gets more crowded, we'll come back and leave no prisoners, take no prisoners on the way back. hopefully there'll be more people out and about on the beach areas and so forth. Just the traffic on that roadway is relentless, so be careful about being on Harinam, jumping off the sidewalk, or making other people jump off the sidewalk. If somebody gets forced into traffic because of our way of congesting the sidewalk and that they get injured or something like that, it will be really an unfortunate circumstance. So safety first, be careful crossing the road, don't take any chances for a heroic distribution of a book to a guy on the other side without looking for traffic, oncoming traffic, and so forth. Anything else? Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchachattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Jagannāth, Baladev, Subhadra, Shri Haridas Thakur, and Varahadev. If you so desire, please instill in us a desire to hear Krishna Katha and to give it to everybody else in the world. Thank you and let us spread Harinam to every city and town. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part, please say Hare Krishna. Vājakalptaruscha kripa sindhaveva cha patitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.